It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays, and I'm going to try to get through this. I am having real trouble with asthma today. As some of you may know, there are a lot of wildfires in Canada. Um, Here, notably, Nova Scotia, Quebec, and then parts of Ontario, further east. Um, but it's affecting the air quality in my area, and I am struggling. So I'm continuing to content. I have not gotten the page for the next workshop up, but it will be Saturday, June 24th. Um, so at least there's that. Unless there's time to lock it in, we'll do this on Feedback Friday. If anybody would prefer Sunday the 25th instead of Saturday the 24th, please let me know. It'll be at 1 p.m. either day so that the Europeans and Pacific coasters can join. But yeah, so it'll be that weekend. I don't care. 24th, 25th. The 25th is a little easier for me, but I'll have to check with the bubbleheads. But we will be talking about healthy conflict. And one of the elements of healthy conflict that is super important are defense mechanisms and projection and understanding them. And so we're going to talk about the shadow self today, or the Jungian shadow. And my favorite metaphor for the shadow is the game Alan Wake, and how convenient that they are making a sequel. If you like this sort of wellness game hybrid content, help support this channel. Excuse me, become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. A big part of one-on-one work that I do with people is isolating those parts of themselves that they are ashamed of, they feel like they have to hide. It's described, the shadow is described as the unconscious aspect of the personality that does not correspond with the ego ideal. And that leads the ego to resist and protect the shadow. Yes, this is very Freudian, very Jungian. This is why I'm going to talk about Alan Wake. Because the thing about the shadow, that if you're not aware of this part of yourself, and I don't like the Jungian metaphors, I will get to why in a bit, but it is, the central concept is sound, that if you're not aware of all your parts, you have a blind spot. And that blind spot means you project. And you can project via archetypes. You blame someone else for things you do. You see the parts of yourself you're trying to deny in other people. And the interesting thing is that you guys know I love my tricksters. I love my trickster characters, deities, all that stuff. And this is what the trickster does in stories, They call out the shit of everybody else because bad guys can do that. And you may notice that I am very comfortable with that. And that it's funny because people are like, you're really different on Twitter. Well, yeah, that's because on Twitter people get my damn bad side. And I admit my bad side's there. And I do not feel the need to hide, major elements of my personality. Just people gotta earn the good stuff, right? People gotta earn nice me. People don't just get nice me. And this is the thing about embracing those things you've been criticized for. And I'm all these things. I'm bossy. I'm annoying. I'm full of myself. I'm arrogant. I'm too loud. I have a shitty voice. I get that one a lot, strangely. And so what? These are all highly subjective, for one. And the other is, I don't care. I am this way for a reason. And accepting the parts of me that other people find difficult means I don't thrust my shit on other people. It's amazing how less defensive you get when you embrace this crap. And I am highly aware of the things I can do that can make people feel hurt or, wound. I avoid manipulations of people at all cost. And persuading somebody and manipulating somebody are very, very different things. That might be a different video. Because I want to talk about Alan Wake and why I think Alan Wake is a great metaphor for, and I'm flipping through papers now because I'm trying to remember if I said I was going to talk about something else today. Doesn't matter. I'm struggling, so we're going to talk video games. Alan Wake has this alter ego named Mr. Scratch. It's very much like Stephen King's The Dark Half, in that The Dark Half is about a writer. Alan Wake is about a writer. And it's all the bad stuff. It's like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? That is the most famous example of a person's dark side, and the thing about Alan Wake is that Mr. Scratch, they do a little twist on it, that Mr. Scratch is the version of Alan Wake that appears in tabloid reporting. And that is very interesting to me. It's an interesting twist, because that is something, first of all, the idea that an author would be significant enough to have tabloid reporting about them. Okay, that's a bit of fiction. The game's a bit old. But I first played Alan Wake and it resonated with me before I got really comfortable with people hating my guts. It was when I was still doing games journalism, so I was still trying to be liked. And I would have done so much better if I wasn't trying to be liked. Because when people know you're trying to be liked because you think it's survival, they dangle that. They choke you with it. They squeeze the life out of you. Someone may not like you. And it's like, oh, do fuck off. That's me now. But what happened between me then and me now? When the hell did Alan Wake come out? God, I need to set the table and make sure I'm remembering properly. Alan Wake came out in 2010. And I remember going to a press preview of Alan Wake. I believe it was at the University of Toronto. It was one of those old, cool buildings downtown. It was like a library. And the cool thing is we were playing the game and a power went out. It was the coolest, accidental fucking upward instead of just fucking up. And it stayed with me. But the reason the date 2010 is significant is because that was before my PTSD diagnosis and a year of intensive trauma therapy. So I was literally a different person back then. And it is a mood to look back and realize I still love that game and I still got that game. But, now it's like, oh man, what are they going to do with this game? Because um, Alan Wake has been stuck in the dark place. That's what's called the dark place for 13 years. Is he going to get out? I'm not sure yet. And so, Alan Wake is a story about him going to a retreat with this, I don't remember his wife or his fiance, trying to get over a case of writer's block. And she disappears. He has to find her, aided by his very Jewish agent Barry, who I don't think they actually identify him as Jewish. He's just Jewish coded, but he armed with a gun he's terrible with and a flashlight that stuns the shadow people coming after him, trying to find his significant other. Alan starts discovering this book he doesn't remember writing. And along the way, the big bad is Mr. Scratch, who, symbol, the reason Alan has writer's block is because all the shitty things people have said about him have gotten into his head. And I am working with quite a few clients now that are struggling with this. Something spooked them. Something destabilized them. And they find it hard to write. They find it hard to read. They can't focus. And that is trauma. And everything, the pages are all scattered. And it was... The cool thing about the Remedy games is they use very tropey scenarios, but then they tell a really meaningful human story. There are certain elements of Alan Wake, though, that the world changed, so I'm very curious to see how they're going to adapt it. But the whole idea of this alter ego that seems to be doing all these horrible things that, Alan can't remember doing it. And that's what happens when someone is fucking with you and people are going around just making up lies about you. Which you may have seen the stalker I have and the whoppers that she comes up with. And when you look at them real closely, they don't make any sense, but most people they don't actually read to seek truth. They read based on emotional responses. And people read a lot in when they're covering for something. And so a lot of people believe, I couldn't believe the people who, even if it is true about her, let's not do this. Let's not drag trans people in because her latest shit was she impersonated a trans person. And the thing is, if you read the thing, it's clearly not true. It's not even internally consistent. But back in 2010, I was not as okay with the fact that people were making up these shadow versions of me, things I just did not do, would never do. But then you start going, would I? Did I do this and just not remember? That's how gaslighting works, right? And that's why if you're recovering from gaslighting or you're, recovering from trauma, accepting the parts of yourself that, your ego doesn't like, is very useful. That self-acceptance process, because now that I'm better at it, nobody's perfect at it, right? We all have weak days and we all have things that just, certain things get to us. And it's something where if one person did or said something, it stings a lot less than another person because one person can't be expected to know better. Another person, you kind of hope they would. But, now I remember it comes up every so often where something, I mean, the latest one was that Ashley Johnson thing. And people were just making shit up about my motivations. And the story got so wild that I was causing harm directly to Ashley Johnson and I was mocking her and that I should really take it down. And then all this came from TMZ because they were stalking the courthouse. And like, none of this has a shred of fact to back it up. People just, something triggered people and they projected all over the place. And I actually see like the shadow creatures coming out, you just shine a light, and the fact that it's light as a weapon, and there's this ongoing motif of a lighthouse in Alan Wake is so, well, Jungian, but, Jung believed there were certain central metaphors, and the lighthouse is seen as the human quest for meaning. Now, Jung was wrong about the universality of metaphors. He was too focused in the West and didn't, factor in, even if you factor in Nordic cultures. For instance, we usually see white as the color of hope. Well, to the Norse, it was green. I'm more down with green. Because we have this, the Christianized color symbology, primary colors. So Superman colors, red, blue, yellow. Good guy coded, right? Secondary colors, green, magenta, yellow as well. Yellow fits in both because it's a light property. But like what Lex Luthor or the Joker wear, those are bad guy colors. But to the Norse, green was good color. Green was hope, right? It's not universal. And we have to be very, very careful about our assumptions regarding metaphors. And that's why I always chuckle. Well, they clearly think this and you're clearly doing that. It's like, there's nothing clear about that. That was nowhere in my mind because I am a very specific form of neurodivergent. And that's what makes the assumptions people make about me so fascinating. Because my brain, I am aware my brain does not work like the majority of people's. And that means that I know I can't assume a person would be doing something for the same reasons I would. That doesn't mean they're doing it for a bad reason. It just means they're doing it for a different reason. And I can't assume the reason. So because I recognize that, I go, hold up, why'd you do that? Or I'll say, and something seeming a bit iffy, I will say, this is starting to look like this. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that's what it looks like. And people have the opportunity to say that is not what I'm doing. And that is a very important thing if you want things to stay on an even keel. And because my brain is weird, and because I am also a nerd, I've been delighting in just first principles thinking on Twitter. And first principles, my boy, first principles, because it's always men that kick my tires on this one. Women don't. I don't know why. I think because women, I don't know what a first principle is. I'm staying away. Guys I don't fucking know what a first principle is. Let's go. Come on. No, you're stupid. Neither's better or worse, but it's really interesting that nobody who challenged me was like, what's a first principle? Because a first principle is a concept that you cannot derive from another concept. And there is not necessarily universality on what first principles are. That's important to recognize. But something like, some people say murder is wrong is a first principle. Or, the shining example of a first principle is the US Constitution, because it flat out says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Self-evident truth means you cannot go, well, this is true because this other thing is true, so I'm deducing or inducing, right? One interesting take on the 10 Commandments is every single one of them is actually about theft. Murder is the theft of a life, stealing is the theft of a property, adultery is the theft of, someone's, the someone's partner, or the theft of trust. It's all about theft. And so that theory is that don't steal, don't take things that don't belong to you, is the first principle of morality. And the nice thing about first principles is, if you know what your first principles are, you can check them out with a thought you have and see if they match. And if it's not consistent, well, you have to figure out where the inconsistency lies. But most people don't think that way. Most people have emotional reactions to things and then fill in a whole bunch of blanks, the whole a posteriori Kantian thing. But I prefer to think of it as Alan Wake, because Alan Wake was a guy who was a pretty good writer, but, he was one of those Stephen King, Dean Koontz style writers. Man, I used to read a shit ton of Dean Koontz, and now I'm like, this is for 15-year-old me. And I don't say it's bad, because those books served a purpose. They weren't intended to be high literature. They were intended to be digestible, meaning, yes, they leveraged tropes and cliches, and sometimes they were very predictable, or at least the setups were, familiar. And, those horror books of that era were very much that. And, that's the setting of Alan Wake. And it's very play within a play with the book and everything like that. But it ends up being more and more, this metaphor for Alan's tortured psyche and these elements of himself that he can't face, that might be true, or might be more true than he wants to admit, which is why he has writer's block. Because when you cut yourself off from major parts of yourself, your creativity suffers. And that doesn't mean you get to treat people, you get to be an asshole to people. Quite the opposite. When you get in touch with these less good things, I'll say less popular things, because that's an important thing about shadow work. Or as I prefer to call it, Alan Waking, is that as you get more in touch with this side you don't like to admit is there, you collect the pages of this story that you don't remember writing. And that's the story that's going on in your head. It's called dialectics or schema. The prisms, the framing you put your life in, the events that happened to you. So, the example they use is, somebody doesn't call you on your birthday. And I am terrible. It's a run-on joke with, a really good friend of mine, where I'll remember her birthday the day before her birthday and the day after her birthday, but I will go in a time hole on the day of her birthday. And thank God she is not picky that way. It's a joke now, because she's got fibromyalgia, so she has brain fog, and I have trauma brain and then long COVID, so it's gotten worse. But she goes, oh, she doesn't care about me. It's just, no. I lose time. I will have these moments where, because one of the things trauma affects is your sense of time. And even though I am highly functional, there are still these elements that I just have to accept. I have to work with how they are. I have to stop fighting to get them to go back to the way they were. And one of the things I have to accept is that I have a really good sense of timing. Talking like this, I can pretty much tell when a half hour is coming up because it's a feeling. When it's music, I've trained the timing. There's this not great movie called Hudson Hawk that I think is so cool. One of the things I thought was cool is they timed their bank robberies by singing songs. Would you like to swing on a star? They knew that was... Now, two people have to sing it at the exact same tempo for that to work, but it was stylish, right? I loved that movie and the critics hated it. Bruce Willis, man. Poor guy's having some health issues. But I can either fight the reality that my brain doesn't work normally. I hate the word normal, but this is a normal thing. Or I can adapt to it. And I can just let people know my brain has trouble this way. And if I say, look, I have this issue, when something like this happens, it's funny instead of people taking offense or feeling like I don't care. Because now I make a point of, I'll say to my friend the day before her birthday, I'm going to fuck up tomorrow. So happy birthday one day early, right? Just to get it in. Because I don't know why. I don't want, if I don't obsessively calendar, things don't get in. And part of it is I'm just juggling too much. I know that. Part of it is I don't rest enough. I know that too. But part of it is trauma. And the way they depicted Mr. Scratch in Alan Wake is this sort of shadowy, like, whenever he said the word scratch, it was, just these missing pieces of data, this fuzzy thing that you can't see. When you start recovering memories, when you start healing from trauma, it's very common to have dreams, nightmares even, about shadowy figures. It's just things coming back. That Celine Dion, it's all coming back to me now. It wasn't bad. I didn't crack. All right, now I coughed. But, and this is where we get into the purpose of Alan Wakeian or shadow work, going in and assembling that novel you don't remember that you wrote based on your dark half. Right. A lot of people either fear that or wallow in it. They treat it as, an unbeatable boss, as Battletoads, or they treat it as proof they're worthless, or it's this unconquerable, insurmountable thing. And it's not. It is as much a part of you as anything else. And you guys know, like, my inner voices are Kratos, Billy Butcher from the show The Boys, and Granny Weatherwax. These are three people who are unpleasant in very different ways, but they all are right about certain things. And I'm just like, yeah, that's me. Because why should I run from it? Why should I run? They're all... Granny Weatherwax is probably the least sensitive and squishy of those three people, just because they're all very angry characters as well, which I find interesting because one of the things I really had to deal with was permission to be angry. Angry was treated as this no good, very bad thing, and it's not. It's fuel. It's feedback. But you can be angry and not do anything about it. Or you can be smart angry, right? But that's the thing about shadow work. Alan Waking. For every mild-mannered Alan Wake that can't even fire a gun properly in you, there's the flip. There's the Mr. Who fucks shit up. And for every Mr. I do that pretty well, don't I? There's a flip side to that. There's a mild-mannered Alan Wake writing a novel he can't remember. And so when I look at, say, she's so this, she's so difficult. She's so angry. She's so, I don't get called bossy much anymore. People use much more colorful language for it. I mean, that's, I don't like the word bitch because what does it mean? Tell me what it means. I can't do anything with bitch. I can think of 20 different things bitch could mean. What flavor of bitch, please? It's a meaningless word. Even, bossy or aggressive. I always get that. And what drives that aggression? Belief in things. Hope that things can be better. An unwillingness to accept injustice. So yeah, I can be downright fucking belligerent. I don't apologize for it. Because of the fact that I realized about myself a long time ago that I wanted the right answer, not the popular one. Which meant I was never going to be popular. And when I tried to be popular, I failed miserably. Because no matter what I do, she's annoying, she's fat, she's ugly, she's old, she's this, she's that, she's yeah. It's like, all right, I'm all those things. Blah! Rabid, right? And when you go through that, you end up finding the people that yeah, she's belligerent. We love it. And, when I'm not having to fight the good fight, I'm, Kratos holding his son, right? Like that scene of, I'm going to break it. That mood, and Kratos is able to adapt. He's very wise. He listened to Atreus, and he refuses to succumb to the idea of fate and prophecy. And you have to have this wellspring of hope. And it's that kind of hope that isn't the nice hope. It's the I've been through a lot of shit and lived to tell about it hope. Yeah, it's not things will be good. It's I will survive this. And if I don't, good story, bro. You just get to this post-fear phase. And a lot of people wouldn't call that hope. I do. Because it is a belief that things can change. And, I mean, that's, Billy Butcher peppers his language with profanity. It's working class English trauma. And he keeps a lot of people at arm's length because he really, when he connects to somebody, he really connects. And he gets broken when people disappoint, betray, or abandon him. And he has all this guilt. But he doesn't care what happens to him as long as Homelander goes down. But he's like the one dude that believes that Homelander has a weakness. And you have to believe someone has a weakness to find it and use it. And since Homelander's big bad, right? That's a form of hope. That's how it works. We champion, we enjoy flawed characters. But when it comes to us, it's that ego. It's that need to be perfect, need to be some paragon. And, I'm a paragon and not being a paragon. One of the important things I think I bring to the table is that I will fully say, like, look, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm willing to experiment, which means things are going to be messy and things are not going to be flawless. And that's, but I'm not a hot mess. I'm not, oh my God, I don't screw over my friends and sleep with people's boyfriends and girlfriends and other kinds of friends and, all that. No, I own my shit. I just know the only way to invent cool shit is to fail until you don't fail. And I remember a time where I just couldn't take any more failing. I was just, I couldn't. It felt like all I did was fail. And, that belligerence kicked in, and it's like, well, I'm convinced if I try, I'm going to fail again. But what's the alternative? Not trying. Unacceptable. Get the fuck back up. Oh, but that's resilience. Resilience and belligerence are sometimes the same thing. What is someone being resilient can be painted as belligerent to somebody else. One person's hope is another person's naivete. And this is what so-called shadow work does. It's Alan Wakeian, Mr. Scratch. And that's why I'm really stoked for Alan Wake 2, because there's a particular like horned god type monster that I'm very interested in what they're doing with that. Because depending on what that's about, the symbolism is very different. But long story short, really learning to like, you don't have to love them, but you have to find a way to like the stuff other people don't like about you. And try this. Consider the fact that the thing people criticize you for the most could be your source of power or your biggest strength. Because that's the thing people are trying to bust down, right? Think about it. See how that works. It's a starting point, right? Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching and be well.